Emanuel Lasker, The Life of a Chess Master. Dr. Jannak. Emanuel Lasker, The Life of a Chess Master, with annotations of more than 100 of his greatest games. Foreword by Albert Einstein. Translated by Heinrich Frankl. Contents page. Foreword by Albert Einstein. 7. 1 Childhood in the Backwoods. 9. 2 The Hungry Schoolboy. 13. 3 The Lure of Professional Chess. 20. 4 Professional in England and America. 29. 5 Playing the Man or the Board. 32. 6 Winning the Title. 43. 7 Setback at Hastings. 48. 8 Triumph at St. Petersburg. 53. 9 Going from Strength to Strength. 56. 10 Fads and Fancies. 79. 11 Triumph in London and Paris. 83. 12 Back to School and Meeting Martha. 99. 13 Editorial Interlude in New York. 104. 14 Cambridge Springs 1904. 106. 15 Tire Match against Marshall. Ill. 16 First Philosophical Essay. 122. 17 At Long Last, The Tarrasch Match. 124. 18 St. Petersburg 1909. 136. 19 Narrow Escape in the Schlechter Match. 149. 20 Happily Married. 160. 21 Lasker Bid for Poultry Farming. 165. 22 The Most Thrilling Tournament. 169. 6 Emanuel Lasker. 23 Stepping Down from the Throne. 192. 24 Triumphant Comeback. 206. 25 Another Great Success. 245. 26 Interlude of Bridge and Literature. 263. 27 Driven into Exile. 268. 28 Holding His Own in Moscow. 281. 29 A Great Farewell Performance. 297. 30 Working to the End. 312. Translator's Postscript. 315. Chapter 1. Childhood in the Backwoods. Chess, the hobby, the mere pastime, may well have the poisonously inspiring effect of a drug. It may well be as intoxicating as wine, a thoroughly enchanting vice, but surely we may well ask, it cannot be worth a great man's while to devote his life to it. After all, it is merely a game, and while its heroes may well claim such fame among their devotees as Tilden and Kemp seated in the realms of tennis and boxing, surely there can be no cause to write the life of a chess master, however great his prowess. What on earth can be the meaning of such a life to any wider public? And what's not Diderot right to say, it is quite possible for a wise man to be a great chess player, but it is equally possible for a great chess player to be a fool. Such doubts are thoroughly justified. To describe the life of one of the heroes of the chessboard, to write the Quixote of a chess crusader may be quite interesting, if may be fascinating for the devotees of the game, but it could hardly be important enough to command the attention of a wider public. As for the man Lasker, what is so remarkable about him is hardly the fact that he is reputed to have been the greatest chess player of all time. The remarkable thing is that all his life he has been striving desperately to get away from chess, towards his very own conception of ultima ratio. Chess to him merely meant a means of livelihood, a pot boiler, and yet, it exercised a spell over him, of which he could never rid himself while using it as a mere point of departure for far wider fields and far greater adventures of the mind. Lasker was chess player, philosopher, mathematician, poet. He wrote a good many books, least of all on chess. He knocked about the world a good deal, seeing many people, many lands, and a bewildering change of epochs, and his long and restless life, 2 years beyond the biblical span of 70 was full of struggle, full of long and spite, full of triumph and disappointment, full of achievement and spleen, and crammed full with adventures of the spirit. He was forever striving to get away from chess, and forever destined to return to it. Chess was Emanuel Lasker's greatness and triumph no less than his inner humiliation and tragedy. All his life he was loath to be restricted to thinking in terms of 30 to 9. Emanuel Lasker 10. Wooden symbols, and yet he was obsessed by them. His was the life of a fighter, but his most exciting struggles were fought far away from those 64 squares on which he was hailed as invincible. They were fought in that wider realm of metaphysics in which there can be no victory but only doubt and the agonizing bliss of doubting one's own doubts. Plus it was from almost ludicrously humble circumstances that Emanuel Lasker was called upon to rise towards his destiny. Everybody, of course, has heard of Berlin. But Berlin. What on earth can be the meaning of that funny diminutive for Germany's capital city? Could it be a district, or, maybe, a particularly small suburb of Berlin? No, it is much less and very much smaller. It is a humble little township some 4 or 5 train hours from Berlin, in the wilds of the province of Brandenburg, that never had more than 7,000 inhabitants. It is surrounded by woods which provide some timber trade, and its main attractions are a rather pretty lake and some quaint old cottages. In the 30 Years' War Berlin was razed to the ground, but it was built up again. In 1811 Napoleon passed through. That is about all that might be noteworthy about Emanuel Lasker's hometown. At all times and through all the vagaries of history it was borderland with a considerable conflux of Germans, Poles, Balts, Russians, Jews. The Jewish community was relatively large, and while the social upper crust of the town consisted of the higher civil servants, the notary, the doctor, the chemist, and a few timber merchants, while the solid German middle class was made up by the minor officials, the small-time farmers and the shopkeepers, it was left to the Jews to look after the shabbier by-products of the town's economic life, such as the pawnshop, small-time business, hawking, agenting. At best it yielded them the poor living, and even the poorest of them, unlike their sedentary German fellow citizens, would longingly cast their minds beyond the narrow confines of the town. Nothing, indeed, could be more significant than the location of the churchyard and the Jewish cemetery. The church right in the center of the town, its neat spire towering over that cluster of tightly tiled houses like a big hen anxiously keeping her chicks under her wing lest any of them be tempted to stray abroad, and the Jewish cemetery right on top of the hill, overlooking that pretty lake and giving a view far beyond the confines of the town, as far indeed as the eye could see. Young Emanuel's eyes could see far enough, but his mind could. Childhood in the backwoods 11. See even further when he climbed up to where the dead were laid to rest and whence one could look out towards the great big world beyond his town, where great adventure and fame might be won. Had not his own grandfather been a famous man? He was a rabbi of Lessen, a small town near the Russian border, but he wasn't just an ordinary rabbi, he was a WMD rabbi whose prophetic gifts were highly honored by Jews many miles beyond his humble town. Nor indeed was it the town of his ancestors. They had come from a small place called Lask, and that was evidently where the family name was derived from. The rabbi's eldest son Adolf had gone to Talmud school, and having been duly appointed cantor at the small synagogue of Berlin, he had taken as his wife pretty young Russel Israel Zohn, who also came from a cantor's family in nearby Solden. They had 2 boys and 2 girls, Bertrand being the firstborn and Emanuel the youngest. In between came their sisters Theophila and Amalia. Emanuel was born on December 24, 1868, on the very eve of the Bismarck epoch in Germany's history, an epoch of rapid industrial and imperialist expansion. We have yet to see how Lasker's life was to be influenced by the growth of that epoch and its aftermath, but meanwhile we can still watch young Emanuel in his quaint little hometown and in the relative security of a family life which, in spite of dire poverty and many privations, was by no means unhappy. Father Adolf barely earned enough to feed his family, but the trouble was that he was too kind-hearted and never able to say no to the shi'ars who would line his path on payday before he had put his salary in Russel's capable hands. One early morning one of them knocked at his door and asked for a pair of shoes. "Look under the bed," said the cantor drowsily and went to sleep again. When he got up to dress he found 2 left shoes only. He had to go to synagogue in slippers. He always was a bit of a dreamer, and but for Rosalie's common sense and thrift his family may well have been even hungrier than they were. Berthold was 8 years older than Emanuel and, naturally, his protector and mentor as they rode through the woods and around the lake. Berthold was the more sensitive of the 2, whilst Emanuel, at a surprisingly early age, proved to be a realist and a fighter. One early childhood experience may have influenced him profoundly. When he was about 5 years old he was considerably overawed by a woman next door who would bang away all day long, screaming invective at everybody and everything and on the slightest provocation or without any provocation at all. Young Emanuel used to 12 Emanuel Lasker. Think of her as a living honor-wetter thunderstorm, and he observed her with a mixture of fear and admiration. One day they had an unusually severe thunderstorm. The ruin came pelting down in torrents. Streaks of lightning flashed all over the darkening sky, and the claps of thunder sounded more menacing than ever. Still, young Emanuel wasn't afraid, or not much anyhow, for his long forest walks with Big Brother Bertrand had accustomed him to the changing moods of nature. But all of a sudden, the woman from next door came running in. She wasn't, this time, screaming like the demon. She was sobbing like a child. She wasn't shaking her fist at anybody. She was trembling like a leaf as she buried her head in Mama Rosalie's lap. For young Emanuel this was a revelation. "What?" he piped. "You, the honor-wetter, are afraid of a honor-wetter?" It was his first experience in debunking, or, for whoever prefers to have it put that way, his first lesson in relativity. It was Grandfather Israel Zoh, and he had to thank for a less melodramatic but nonetheless impressive and lasting lesson in relativity. One day, little Emanuel felt he hadn't had enough sugar for his coffee, and he began to cry. His grandfather made no fuss at all about the child's tantrums. Feigning absent-mindedness, the shrewd old man took one of the sugar lumps from the boy's saucer and nibbled off a bit. Emanuel went on complaining, and his grandfather repeated the procedure until it dawned on the future philosopher, mathematician and chess master that, if he carried on talking instead of acting, there would be less and less sugar rather than any more of it. So he stopped moaning and started to consume what there was of it. It was certainly a useful object lesson in what was to be his theory of matchology, his very own philosophy of the struggle of life.